Welcome to Unscripted, the Unscripted Authentic Leadership podcast where we are leading change and seeking to understand. I am your host, Lafayette Lane, joined by my co-host, John LeBron, here for another exciting week and exciting episode to bring to you, the listeners, here at the Unscripted Authentic Leadership podcast. Before we get into the topic, we definitely want to say thank you to all of our supporters who have been supporting us, whether you're a day one supporter or you're new to the podcast. We want to say thank you. Those of us who have been subscribing, as you see at the bottom of the screen there, to our YouTube page at Unscripted Authentic Leadership, or whether you are following us on Facebook, on our Facebook page, Unscripted Authentic Leadership. Even those of you that are on our Instagram at Unscripted Leadership, or even if you're following and streaming the podcast via streaming platform, whether that be Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast, Stitcher, Buzzsprout, iHeartRadio, Intune, TuneIn, Amazon, and various others, we want to say thank you. We appreciate your support. And those of you that are watching this or listening, definitely tune in and invite somebody else to tune in and lend their ear to this podcast. They will never be the same. I promise you their lives will be the better for it. Well, John, how are you doing, man? It's been a good week. It's been a great week. And here we are again for another episode. We're creeping up on almost at 10 episodes strong here. Our podcast, I don't think, is even 2 months or barely 2 months old. So we haven't missed a week. We've been going strong. And so it's just been a great week. And I know 2020 has been a crazy year, but it's still a great year at the same time. So how are you feeling, man?
I'm good. Yep. 2020 has been kind of ridiculous, but it's all good. We'll get through it together, right? Yeah. Everybody on here strong. And 2021 will hit. It'll be the best New Year celebration we've had. Right. Usually like Happy New Year, yay. I think everybody's going to be really happy to say Happy New Year this year. So absolutely. It's all good though, guys. Everybody just keep on keeping on. God doesn't put anything that you can't handle, so you'll be fine.
Absolutely. Definitely. And so even though it's been a crazy year, we're going to finish this year strong. One of the ways that we're going to do that is by introducing a new topic to our audience today. For November, we're going to be talking about voting and different aspects of voting. Those of you that know the time that we are in an election cycle, and we are about 30 days away from that November 3rd date, which is Election Day. Last month, we talked about diversity, and I think that was a great series. I think the audience really enjoyed that, and we definitely enjoyed each week, even featuring our first special guest in that series. And we look to have some more special guests here soon. And so today, we want to just simply talk about your vote matters. Your vote matters. That's the episode topic we want to talk about today. Like I said, I just really want to reiterate that voting is about 30 days away. And those of you that have not registered to vote, you have less than 24 hours. October 5th, I believe, is the cutoff date for that. And we will provide that link as we did last week when you get this episode. And so we want to talk about today, your vote matters, and talk about voting, why it's important. We both talked about this a little bit last week, but we want to get more in depth on it. We talked about it from the aspect of the Black community and why it was important to vote because of the Civil Rights Act of 1965 and also the 1964. We know President Lyndon B. Johnson passing that particular act that was to stop the segregation of minorities, Blacks, African Americans, where they could not vote. So it's only been about 55 years since we've had that privilege and that right. So we want to talk a little bit more in depth of since we do have that right, does it make a difference? Why should we do it? And how could we go about it? So John, let's just Start off, man. Why is it important to vote? Because I don't think we're attacking it from the angle saying is it important, because we are declaring this is our stance that it is absolutely unequivocally important to vote, not just because of what I mentioned before concerning the Civil Rights Act, but it's important for um, every race to vote. Those of you that have been paying attention to the debates and everything that's been going on, whatever side you lean to, that's your prerogative. But we know that this is essential. We have essential workers in the time of this pandemic. I want to tag this election as an essential election. That the next 4 years are really contingent upon whether we get out there and get the job done at the voting poll. And so, John, just tell us why it's important. We know it's important, but why is voting important?
So obviously we could talk about the making your voice heard,
Yeah,
and all those things about, and we'll get into the local stuff and
sure.
what issues, how to look up issues and stuff like that. But on the probably the next episode or so. But the fact of why it's important, I think the reason we declare it's important, but I think a lot of people underestimate the how special it is to have the ability to vote. And I do agree that everybody in this world, right, as a child of God, should have a say in their community.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, most people in this world do not. It's just the facts. There is roughly 167 countries in this world. Only 75 of them have voting rights.
Mm,
So
mm,
that's almost, it's probably about 40% roughly, okay? And of those, many of them are incredibly flawed. Every voting system has flaws, okay? There's no perfect system. Some are better than others, whatever. Ours is not perfect by any means. We see flaws here and there, and it's going to happen.
yeah.
But a lot of countries, even where they give you the voting rights, they mandate that everybody votes. It's a law. You must vote. And everybody says, "Well, good. That makes you practice your like responsibility to vote, or your civil duty." The reason that most countries, if a country mandates that everybody has to vote, typically it's because there's a rigged voting and they want to know that everybody had a say, and so they
Mm,
just think that it's kind of a game, right? There's a lot of countries where you go to vote and there's guards at the doors. There's countries you go to vote and your life can be in serious jeopardy for voting the wrong way. So it's not like here where we just show up to the local YMCA or church and you can walk in and vote without anybody sort of interrupting your day because they all have to stay 100 yards away from the door, kind of thing. So it is so special. A little history lesson. In the U.S., did you know? So in 1789, which was the first election year, we only had 13 states. And so at the time, the states determined the voting requirements. And at that time, there was basically you had to be a white male, everybody knows that, but also a property owner. So you had to be a property owning white male. And that only left about 6% of the population could vote. Six. So
mm,
6 out of every 100 people. That's pretty bad. Were able to vote. Okay, so fast forward, that went on for almost a lot of years. Basically, they eventually got rid of the property requirements, but there would be poll taxes. So you could we go to the polls. Well, you'd have to pay a
mhm.
tax to go to the polls in most states. Therefore, it was hard for everybody to have a right to vote. How much? I don't know. It depends on the state. 1870 is, most people know, voting rights were given to all races, right? But that's when the Jim Crow laws actually began at the same time in most southern states, which made it really difficult to vote
Yeah,
and do things because that's when segregation happened. And then women didn't even have the right to vote until 1920. That's only been 100 years, right?
yeah. Not that
And
long ago.
so, and non-whites have only been able to vote for 100 and, what am I, 130 years? No, 150. And even then, we can agree that even though the law was passed, it didn't mean that most felt they could actually vote, right? And the poll tax payments, get this, the poll tax payments didn't actually get abolished until 1964. So until the 1960s, you had to be able to afford to pay a tax to go vote. And then if you were under 21, you couldn't have voted until 1971. And so most people don't realize that because we've forgotten that. Like, it is precious to be able to vote. Yeah. And if we don't exercise the right, then it can be taken away from us easier because people care less about that right. And you think, oh, it would never get taken away. I promise you, if certain politicians could, they would have certain rights taken away at times to help their voting numbers and so forth. And so, yes, it could happen. And it would happen if people don't exercise that right. So we have to vote. Non-election years, less than 50% of the population votes. I don't even know what it is in election years, but it's not amazing. So anyways.
That was really good, man. You said some facts in there that I was unaware that I hadn't heard before. Mm-hmm. Specifically about the voting being mandatory in some other countries, and that's not a good thing. It's actually to plan for it to be rigged.
It means you're not really free, right?
And it's not really free, right?
I mean, you're not a free person, yeah.
Thought came into my mind, and I didn't even write it in the notes as you were talking. I kind of want to get your opinion on it, and I'll give my opinion on it first, to kind of go along those same lines. Not saying that it's been made mandatory, but about the absentee ballot, about the absentee voting through the mail. I kind of want to get your thoughts on that. My thoughts, I hadn't heard of it until this election cycle, until recently. I thought it was something that was put in place because of the pandemic and because of social distancing and COVID-19, not knowing that this is not anything new. So my thoughts on it are it's kind of mixed, because one side of me can understand because of, like I just mentioned, pandemic. I am the social distancing, and you don't want to get people sick because of being in close confines at being at a physical poll. But there's another side of me that says there's a great possibility that there could be some votes lost, a lot of votes not counted. The timing of the votes, if these votes are put in through the mail, I know it's already open for those that are doing that. Will it be counted by the time of the election? Will this prolong the election or re-election of the current president or a new president? Will this cause another conspiracy theory? And so I have mixed thoughts about it. And so I kind of want to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the absentee ballot voting?
The answer to your last questions are yes. They would do all the above, I think. Okay. So I've known about absentee for a long time because I grew up military. And it's used in military families, not often, but when needed, right? Sometimes you are moving locations during that time, and you have to have that. Sometimes you could be a family member could be overseas. There's different situations on TDY sometimes, which means you're just kind of away for a couple months or a year. Okay. There's a lot of and it's very common in military families to have your family member gone, for several months every couple of years, and so. I've always heard of it. My family has never, that I can tell, hasn't utilized it a lot, but I had friends and families who probably did. And so the idea was that you can while you're absent, you can cast your vote, right? It's great, but as such a small population, or if you're unable to get to a poll, you have that option. Maybe you're elderly and you can't make it. The problem is, in my opinion, yes, there's a big push to have everybody fill an absentee ballot. Yeah. I don't know. And my fear is, so when you go to the poll, you have to be able to vote sort of undistracted. Nobody can stand at the door and wait and sort of sway your vote. Even if you come to the poll and there's somebody in the parking lot, they typically have a marking of how far away they have to be from that door. So yes, you can stand sort of around the polls, but it has to be like 100 yards or something like that. And so that's designed so that way nobody can sort of bully you or change your vote because you're afraid of just to impede on your vote.
Okay.
Now, how do you enforce that with absentee ballots? You know what I mean? Things like that.
Right,
Also,
right, right, right.
also, as we know, I don't know how many elections you're still young. Elections, and I am too. I'm almost 37,
This
but
is my
I've
third
seen a
election.
few. Yeah, yeah. So as you know, typically, as on election night, you'll see
Yep.
the numbers coming in, the poll numbers, and after a certain percentage of poll numbers, they will concede the president the seat, right? One of the other parties typically will concede it because they're saying statistically there's no way to catch up, and it's really not that many percentage numbers to us. We're always like, it's only 5%. What's the big deal? And
Yeah.
really, that's like a crazy amount of votes by a certain time of the evening. Well, I don't think that they always get all the absentee votes counted until afterwards. There's no way they can count them that night
Right. Or
because the polls are electronic. It's doing it it's
as you
like
go.
current data,
Right.
and so I mean they close out the polls and then they have the numbers. There's no way to manually count those, but they have to be counted. They always are counted, but okay, how do we know how many were turned in? If there's a like this year, there could be a large number.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think any candidate necessarily would concede that night. Maybe not. Maybe depends on whether it's a complete landslide. But in my opinion, if you can get to the poll, go. Here's why. You
Okay.
go to the grocery store. I mean, you know what I mean? You get on the airplane, you go everywhere else with your mask. So if you're a high risk, you have the absentee ballots. I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
If you can't get to the poll, you have it. But I don't necessarily agree with politicians pushing the absentee ballot because every major corporation has made themselves open right now for their profits, obviously. And I mean, they say for us, but really it's to be profitable. That's fine. I don't want
Sure.
them to close. Um, so why wouldn't we also allow polls? Most polls aren't flooded with people. There might be a small line, but it's shorter than, the grocery store. Or, remember when the pandemic first hit, if you went to Lowe's, there was a line all the way down the one side, the whole side of the store. I mean, it's going to be definitely shorter than that. And there's not a lot of contact. Yes, you're touching the screen. There's no reason they can't sanitize them as we go, just like you do inside a lot of stores and so forth. So, yeah, I think my worry with too many absentee ballots is fraud, and they've already caught some things, audio of people committing fraud within the absentee ballots, and it hasn't even gotten to. We're just getting close to the election, so yeah, that's my fear. But it's there. I don't think we should take it away. I just think we should leave it up to the people to do what they think's best.
That's great, bro. Great. Absolutely. And I appreciate that perspective on that. Um, yeah. So those that are kind of weighing in the balance, should you do the absentee or should you go in person? I just think that we just gave our perspective and our opinion on that, and you can do with that as you please. But kind of just go through it and think about the process and what really matters to you. If your gut is telling you one option over the other, there's probably a reason for that. And so we want to continue talking about the reason why your vote matters, because there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of things that we've been taught just from schooling, whether it be middle school, high school, governmental classes, the simple foundational things about voting that really did not prepare us um, to make a conscious and responsible decision when it comes to voting. And when you're misinformed, you can make a mistake and a misstep. And so, another thing that we want to cover, which is one of the things that is covered while we're in high school and middle school government class, but not to the extent where we need it to be. And it's left a lot of people confused and not sure of is the Electoral College. This is one myself that I still struggle with. And I think that that's a part of the issue of why people don't think their vote matters, simply because of how we understand what the Electoral College is. In the simple terms, is the body of electors established by the U.S. Constitution, which forms every 4 years for the sole purpose of electing the president and the vice president of the United States. So we know that in this electoral college, there is a certain amount of electors, roughly about 538, that come together during this process that determine the ultimate voting outcome. But I think it is much more in depth than that. And so, John, kind of give us what, why does the Electoral College matter, or what is it, rather? Because most people think a majority vote would make their vote matter more if we would go away and we would abolish altogether the Electoral College. Do you think that's a good idea? Kind of give us your thoughts on what the Electoral College is and if it's important or not, or whether we should have more of a majority or popular vote.
Okay, so majority popular votes are great, but they're better in smaller, I guess, like in states and so forth, where the population is smaller. Because what happens if you go on a pure popular vote is there's going to be a lot of people not represented.
Okay.
Right now, a lot of people say my vote, it doesn't really matter, so I'm not going to vote, right? Yes, your one vote probably does not change the results of the election, probably even locally, probably even for school PTO, let's be honest, right? But the attitude of my vote doesn't matter, really that compound effect creates more people not voting, which does impact the results.
That's good.
It really does impact it. So it's just a bad attitude to have. So if that's yours, we have to stop that. It's not like voting is this huge inconvenience, and it is important. So your vote matters obviously more as the body of voters is smaller, on a 1-to-1 vote. But your national elections, it does count because of the Electoral College. Okay. So each state has electors. They're actually people who cast a point sort of thing, or electoral point, or college towards the presidential candidate. Each state, it's based on the total number of representatives in Congress. And if you know, the number of representatives in Congress is based on your population. So, therefore, your Electoral College votes are based, if you kind of reverse engineer that, on your population, right? And that's where the census comes in, which we'll get into. What this does is it helps keep the states from being ignored by the candidates. So if you were to take the majority of the population, they reside in the major cities of the country. Mm-hmm. Therefore, if I was a president and I wanted to get elected, I would only visit the major cities. What that means is there would be no more Ohio tours, right? There would be no more Iowa tours, all those things.
Right.
They would be in LA, San Francisco, Minneapolis, right, New York City, Atlanta, and all these other Dallas, all these other big big giant cities that I'm not even thinking of yet. So they just wouldn't care. The first time I saw I was in college, I believe, or maybe just out, and I didn't even follow, honestly, the elections that much, but I went to Wright State University here in Beaver Creek, and John McCain was coming to the Nutter Center to do a speech. I'd never been. Someone said, hey, you should come out. So I did. It was a good time, nothing crazy, just talking and, whatever. I don't remember what was said, but I do remember thinking, I can't believe he came out here, right? So Beaver Creek is it's not a small town, it's a city, but it's not a big city. It's not even sort of big city. Okay. And so I was like, what is he doing here? Right. He never would have shown up. There would have been no tour through Ohio. President Trump went through Vandalia of all places, which is not big. Right.
Right.
I don't know why exactly he picked that spot. I have no idea, but there wouldn't have been there. I'm sure the candidate Joe Biden will be through Ohio too if he hasn't already, through certain spots. So it helps you that because each state has sort of votes, it puts it helps you from getting ignored. What else? So I had some votes on here, or some notes on here. So, for example, think about it this way. If you were in a rural area, you would never get represented. If you were a farmer, you would never get represented. Mining, never get represented. Any of those things. So if you're in the Dakotas, nobody will ever care about you. All of those things. In 2000, President Bush won the majority of the states. So I think he got like the states. It was like 30 some states he won, 35 or something like that. Pretty good, but he lost the popular vote, but he still won the election. Tells you that now the only downside is it's a winner take all. So if the state is 51 to 49%, like Ohio comes across a lot, then it goes red or blue. They get all the votes. Yeah. So that part, don't necessarily always love it, right? But that's kind of how that works. In 2016, President Obama won the popular vote, but he only won 22% of the counties, right? But he won the counties that mattered. So it can go both ways. It really can. Also, I had something else I was going to say, and I don't remember what it was. It was important. But anyways, so that tells you a little bit about the Electoral College and why it matters. And it really helps you actually get more of a representation than just a strict popular vote.
Absolutely. That's great. And I think the emphasis of what you said, everything that you said, that was great. I really want to emphasize what you said about the reason why it's so important because of the representation. And if you don't have representation, then you are often looked over, you are often forgotten. And if that is the case, then you will feel that you have no say and you don't think your vote matters. You don't think that you matter without that representation. So that's a different perspective on the electoral college. It's another piece to that big puzzle of that word representation. Another part of representation is the census. The census, as we talked about last week, many people don't know. I was unaware. I've heard the term, didn't know exactly what it was, didn't think it was that important until you realize that one of the things that we are fighting for as a Black community and Black people is more representation and the right representation. And the Electoral College provides that, as you just mentioned, John, but the census also provides that. What the census does, it provides critical data that lawmakers, business owners, teachers, and many others use to provide daily services, products, and support for you and your community. So every year, billions of dollars in federal funding go to hospitals, it goes to fire departments, schools, roads, and other resources based upon that data. So the money will flow where the representation is represented. So they will fund and give these different resources to your community only if the data is showing, hey, there's a need here for this particular segment of the population, for this particular community, whether it be in a rural area, as you mentioned, the farmers, whether it be more in a urban community or the suburbs or whatever particular context of community that you are in. The census helps to provide that data because we know life, when it boils down to it, is all about numbers. And so when lawmakers are looking at it, they rather honor numbers than they hear all of these things going on in the community. But if they can't see it statistically, they won't be able to really give credence to it that it needs to. But if they can actually see facts, numbers, and statistics that say, hey, there's a community here on the west side of Dayton that needs more funding than Oakwood. And let's put some more dollars to this school system. Let's put some more dollars to these systems over here for the food and for the transportation and things of that nature. So the census is very, very critical. But the only way that this data can be collected is you have to be participants in providing those numbers. And so we talked about that, how different people from the Census Bureau will come and knock on your door and simply ask you questions of how long you've lived at your residence, how many people live in your house, how long you've lived there, what's your name, and simple things like that. That may seem invasive at first, but when you realize the result of those answers, you will be benefited better for that than not answering and thinking that it's just another person that's trying to annoy you or trying to sell you something or solicit something to you at your door. And so, John, talk to us why the census is so critical for representation.
Yeah, so just so y'all know, this only happens every 10 years. So
good.
If you I've never seen this before, it's because only every 10 years. And many of our listeners, if you're under the age, if you're 28 or younger, you would not have realized that you would not have had you probably had a knock at your door, but didn't realize what that was. So if one thing good has come out of the COVID, it's this. The census has been pushed back, the deadline, to the 31st of October. Okay. Typically would have passed about 5 days ago, or whatever today is, the end of last month. Wow. And so it has been pushed back, so you guys can put your be counted. Now, if you have somebody coming to your door, like I did, like Lafayette did, it's typically because you have not filled it out online. Okay, so guilty.
Okay.
So, but they will come to your door. So now mine was like a month and a half ago, so they start early.
Yeah.
Go to my 2020, so 2020 census.gov, or just go to vote.org, and there's a link towards the bottom for the census. You can just go on there and make yourself count. Everybody needs to do it. Just please, when you hear this, just pop on your phone, go on it. Vote.org, go down, click on census. There's a lot of other things, great things on that website. Fill out the census. It won't take you more than 5 minutes, if that, maybe 3, and then you'll be done. It's just asking things like, how many people are in your home, what's the income, does everybody have health insurance, stuff like that. There's hundreds of billions of dollars in federal and state funds, guys, that are going to get distributed. And it's by that data. There's no other way for them to understand than to use some kind of data system. So the country's just too big. So that's how they know what they need. Hospitals, highways, stadiums, school programs. They ask these questions. That's how they know if there's too many elderly people living alone and they should build more senior living. Are the schools overcrowded? Things like that. That's what this helps them determine. It helps them know if roads are probably getting too jammed up in a certain area because of the population. These are all the things that you don't realize that could help your community. Nonprofits use it to get numbers on how many volunteers they could probably have in certain areas if they were to go that way. 911 uses it to base maps, right? All kinds of stuff like that. They use the census for natural disasters. So when there's a hurricanes down in the southern states, they know about how many people should be evacuated or could be affected by census. That's how all this stuff is, and also future growth. So I read this: businesses will use a census somehow to identify areas of where would be a good spot for future business growth, which is great for your community. So it's important.
Absolutely.
Vote.org.
Absolutely. And that link right there, for those of you that are watching on the screen, you'll see that link right there that will provide you this census link. And also, as we mentioned at the top of the show, the registration voting link, the
Yeah.
last day to vote, or to check if you're registered to vote, because some of you are registered to vote, but you don't have an updated address. So you need to update your address, and even check if you're registered to vote. For those of you in Ohio, the voting registration link is right there on the screen. HTTPS OLVR, which is Ohio link for registered voters .ohiosos.gov. And we will put that, for those that may not watch the podcast, we'll put that in the description link if you're streaming it, so you will have that information. And so we want to wrap this topic up, but there is one more thing that I see here in the notes, John, that I think that you wanted to talk about, the way that we think we operate as a country. We often think that we operate as a democracy, but kind of kind of fill the people in, our audience in, and let them know, is that really true? And I know I keep terming it like this, but I'm being intentional. Why does that matter? I'm being intentional when I say that. I want to emphasize: do we operate as a democracy, or do we operate under a different banner? And why is that important? Why does that matter?
Yeah, so if you remember when you're a kid and you would sing the Pledge of Allegiance and you say, I pledge allegiance to the flag, blah, 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 blah. And then it would say, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, which they try to take out, and so forth. To the republic.
Yeah.
We live in a republic, and most people don't know that. Look at your money. It usually says republic on there. We are not technically a full democracy, but we are a democratic society. So a republic is a form of democracy. Most countries are that are democracy tend to be a full democracy or sort of a fake democracy where they say they are, but really they're being ruled or something. But that's what we're fighting to not become, right? But most full democracies don't last. So here's what a republic is. As a republic, we elect individuals to represent the citizen body and exercise powers according to the rule of law under the Constitution. This is why your state and local elections are so important. Some people say, well, why shouldn't we just do the full democracy popular vote and we don't need the representation? Well, imagine what it would be like if the population could vote themselves without the boundaries of the Constitution, right? So that's why we have a representative. Do you think all of the voting members are going to be thorough? We have 350 million people in this country. So most people are not well versed in the Constitution or the rule of law. All you know is the basic rules, right? You can't shoot somebody. You can't do this. There's certain inalienable rights that we have to follow, right? U.S. is one of the youngest countries in this world, but we have the longest standing form of government. So I get that we're not perfect, but you can't deny that, like, a lot of people say this country's terrible, We got work to do. I'm not disagreeing. But if you go to another country, typically it's worse. So that's why I like the country, and I would, I just want it to be better. So you can love where you are enough to want to always improve, right? My kids aren't perfect, but I always want them to get better, right? I'm not perfect, but I'm always trying to get better. So it's okay to say I love the country, but man, we got a long way to go. There's nothing wrong with that. The reason we work so hard is because we love what we want to, or we want to love where we live, right? So while I understand that a lot of people have this feeling of I don't like this country anymore, there's things I don't like about the country. But it doesn't mean that I'm not willing to fight to make it better. But yes, the republic basically means that we elect individuals to sort of represent the body of those who elected that person, and therefore they can make choices, which is also why I'm in very big favor of, which isn't even on my notes, of So in Congress, there's no term limits, so they could basically be in there forever. What used to be when you would run for office, it was sort of a duty. You weren't getting paid. If you did, it wasn't much, and a lot of those people had like companies they ran, law firms, different things, small businesses, but they would go for these offices because they wanted to better their country. Well, now people make a lot of money just hanging out in Congress, whether it's the House, the Senate, doesn't matter. And over time, I think they really do lose touch with reality. And because they make a nice set of incomes, and yes, if you notice, they have recesses where like when you're in school, only their recess goes for months on at a time, where they don't meet until like they're getting ready to recess here in a couple weeks or a month, and they won't come back until January or something like that. Yeah. And I get they got things to do locally. I'm not disagreeing with that, and I don't think that they should work 24/7. But if we had term limits, then I think people would feel a little bit better about having a republic, because they could. You would eventually have new people in those elections, not the same name winning every single time, based on familiarity. And so, anyways, yeah, that's the republic, guys. It's not a bad thing in my opinion. I think it's great. Because it typically happens in a lot of full democracies as people start to vote themselves portions of the treasury, and as soon as you can do that, you're typically your country doesn't last. So
good, man. I think that was good what you said about the improvement piece, where you can love where you are, but still recognize we still have a ways to go. One of those ways that you can improve yourself is by reading. And we want to give one of our reads of the week this week about The Art of Dealing with People by Les Giblin. John, tell our audience why they should read this week and how this book can improve their lives, and especially those that are in leadership.
Yeah, so I thought of this book after hearing about the last debate and how few people skills were used universally through the debate. And so I thought, well, certainly we can conduct ourselves better. And, so hopefully the next one, maybe it was just heated and the next one will be better. I don't know. I get that being on a stage like that can be, sometimes you can get beyond yourself. And let's just pray that that's what the issue was. So the first thing I thought was, man, some people could really use some people skills today. And the first people skill book I ever read was The Art of Dealing with People. It's probably 50 pages long, max. And it is loaded with just bullet nugget after golden nugget on people skills, how to have conversations, how to deal with difficult people, that kind of thing. So it's a terrific book.
Absolutely, absolutely. And our second read of the week will coincide with those people skills. I did watch that and that debate, and we definitely could go back to kindergarten and definitely learn some fundamental, fundamental principles that we're missing. And so the second read of the week is Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Travis Bradberry and Gene Greaves. This is a book that really has helped me personally, my personal life. Many people have heard of the term IQ, intelligence quotient, but they have not heard of EQ. That is the emotional quotient. So there's a lot of people that are highly intelligent, but they lack emotional intelligence and emotional integrity, that you don't know how to manage your emotions.
Yeah, emotionally unstable.
That goes right along with The Art of Dealing with People. I have not read The Art of Dealing with People, and I will definitely be reading that. But those pick up the Art of Dealing with People and pick up the Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It will really make you do self-inventory and really make you confront yourself to see how in tune you are with yourself and your emotions. Man, listen, this has been another successful week of Unscripted. Authentic Leadership. I've enjoyed the conversation, and we pray that those that will watch this and listen to this, we know that you will be blessed. And as always, we want to continue to build those bridges and not walls. Bridges connect and walls divide. This has been another week of the Unscripted Authentic Leadership podcast. Lafayette Lane and John LeBrun here, your host. And we thank you for tuning in. And until next time, we pray you have a blessed week and that you be the leader that God has called you to be.